Good, good. So we have a lot to talk about. And I know there's a lot of people that are interested to hear what you have to say. But before we go there, if you could share a little bit about you and your background, because you went from one of the largest ad tech platforms to one of the largest spenders globally. Not many people can claim that. So if you could share a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, I did start my career in media at Google. I joined the European team right after my graduate degree, and after a short stint in sales on the team, I moved then to the marketing and media organization within Google. And it's interesting because people think about Google oftentimes as a publisher; they don't think about it as a very large advertiser, right? And I was fortunate enough to work with some brilliant people there to set up the internal media team and that guides the advertising and promotion of all the Google products, both on the B2B and the B2C side, at a global level. My focus and specialization was on performance marketing and performance marketing strategy, and so guiding the way we were working with all our agencies when we were buying across the board, right, from traditional to digital to everything else, right, measuring performance and making sure that we were meeting our objectives. After almost 10 years there, I got a call from someone that was recruiting from for AB, and at the beginning it was interesting because it's like AB or company, but then they were like, no, listen, there is this company within AB called ZX that they're actually ZX Ventures. They're actually doing incubation and innovation, and so we're looking for someone to manage the marketing globally for e-commerce for them and the nascent e-commerce platforms that they had. So I joined that role, and after 3 years there, I or 3 years, but really felt like dog years to some degree, in a very positive way. But we did a
Yeah.
lot on that front. We grew incredibly. Then I was tapped on the shoulder again, say, "Hey, we're looking for a head of media for the US." And honestly, I was also there a little bit torn because I felt like I was going from media to marketing to media again, but actually what it was given as perspective to me, and actually is very true, is that the way we do media within Anheuser-Busch in the United States is something a little unique on its own in the way we partner with sponsorship and events and all these kind of things. And I feel like I've learned a lot, and it's been a great experience on this front, and it's exciting every day.
Awesome, great, and just so the audience knows, can you share what's the difference between AB InBev, right? That's globally, and Anheuser Busch, right? Because I know we talked about this, so if you could kind of let everyone know what the difference is.
For sure, very good clarifying question. We talk about AB InBev as our global group and company, but then in the United States we refer to it as Anheuser-Busch, or AB for short, and it's just describing the global. I'm sorry, the US entity, and I'm leading media and data for the US entity myself, and I work with my global counterparts and other countries as well to benchmark and improve every day.
Great, great. And before we get started, a little bit about me for everyone so you know. My name's Ken Harlan, founder, CEO of MobileFuse. Outside of, say, Facebook and Google, when it comes to in-app, large reach in the US, we're one of the main companies. We work with a lot of agencies and brands, specifically around receptive moments and really impactful creative. So, okay. All right, so let's go back. I mean, I know a lot of these we start back in, hey, what happened in March and April, and we won't spend a lot of time there, but I think it's a good way for folks to, hey, how did Anheuser-Busch, you and your team and your efforts, what transformed, like take us back short term, COVID, its impact and changes you guys made right away.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's a good way to start to think about the future, right? You want to see how we got there and how we're going to move forward. So I think that as many other brands, companies, and advertisers out there, the first thing was a little bit of a shock in terms of saying, okay, what's happening, and figuring out how we would adjust our strategy in order to adjust to the fact that people were locking down, people weren't traveling anymore, people weren't doing the things that they used to do. So, for example, we had to answer the question, what do we do for our out-of-home media, and how do we pivot maybe to digital out-of-home and trying to zero in on those areas where we know people are going to concentrate. For example, grocery stores, right? When they do, they're shopping now once every 2 weeks, maybe, rather than once, a week or so, or geofencing for mobile to move much more into the shopper marketing kind of mentality versus broader branding awareness and brand equity. And that is also another thing that we had to do, thinking about how do we switch our messaging for something that was much more relevant and sensitive to what people were doing at the time or cared for at that time, right? So if it's either stock up or thinking through what their safety and what they care for. So in that sense, we went through 4 phases in terms of tuning our message to the moments in time. We first of all was addressing the consumer fears, what we call them, right? In terms of saying, am I safe? What's happening? And all these kind of things. And there is where AB did a great work in terms of working with our partners to converting some facilities to Red Cross blood donation centers, or producing hand sanitizer, right? Which is a byproduct of alcohol, which we're very familiar with. And the second thing was creating new occasions, and therefore people were locked at home and thinking through, okay, how are they going to pass time? So we had music streaming and food pairing sessions and things that could keep people entertained. Then the third phase was a little bit like, how can we help our partners and bars and restaurants and everything to grow again, and because of the lockdown. So we had initiatives like Open for Takeout, where we were promoting some of the bars and restaurants where you can order food and together with drinks, and or other partnerships that we've done in order to support small venues in terms of concert venues and things like this. And then the last phase was, how do we, return to the new normal, if you will? And so what is the return of sports going to look like? And so we've activated in a very interesting way when there was the golf tournament called The Match earlier this year, or even if you've seen followed the NBA season recently, right? How do we cater to a world where there's not a live audience? And it was a very interesting challenge, but we had to adapt. And through this process of adaptation, we learned very much. We learned a lot, and it was interesting.
That's great. So before we move on to kind of where you're at and where you're going, what was, you mentioned a few things, but what was kind of like your proudest moment, being a part of AB during this time?
Yeah, no, I think that there are a few things that really made me proud of the situation. First of all, how the company has reacted, right? And thinking, okay, let's tone down all our product and brand messages and really focus on what can we do to help the community, right? And so the hand sanitizers and the broad drives, those were very important. But, reflecting on it for a second, I think that thing that makes me the most proud is the example that we were able to set for everyone in our company, especially the more junior folks in our company. At that point, we normalized the fact that the most immediate and important thing to be done is helping out the community, right? So, for example, when I got the note from the Red Cross saying, hey, we are having issues with blood donations because people are not going out, they're not donating blood. Is there anything that you can do in order to help us, with some media inventory to draw attention to this problem? And everyone in the team dropped everything, and they, pull up, media buys and digital out of home boards and geofence buys that were overlapped with where the donation centers were, in order to, to help out as fast as we can. And it was remarkable, right? And then also it was beautiful to see when we reached out to our partners, like our DSPs, they were like, oh, this is a great thing that you guys are doing. Let us help out and double down on, the media you're spending with us in order to push that program further. And, I think that the reason why it makes me proud is that because if leadership is a testimony of what you leave behind, here we really gave a chance to the younger generations of leader to know how to react in a situation like this, which is, for me, is remarkable. It's very important.
It's great. It's great. So one of the things I know we talked about, hey, where do we go from here, right? There's been a lot of adjustments, right? But where I really enjoy, I mean, I obviously enjoy talking to you all the time, but one of the things I found really interesting was your term, attention-based economy. And you said, look, that's where we're going. That's what we're doing. And probably everyone right now, I was thinking, what's he going to say? But it's actually, once you work through it, it makes a lot of sense. So, can you explain what attention-based economy is, and then where you see AB kind of shifting to go in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good question, because as you know very well, this is one of my obsession here in my role. But, before I go into the details, I want to start by saying that, for how challenging and difficult this year is, I think that, there is that great quote from Winston Churchill that says, never waste a good crisis, right? And I think that this is the moment we're in right now. Just like we are in a moment of challenge, and we need to figure out if we want to use this moment in order to move forward and build a better future in that sense. And so this is, the work that I'm also doing with the A&A and some network partners, some agency partners, and all these kind of things. But related to the attention economy, I think that, we are in a moment where attention is a very scarce resource, and we all have to work together in order to figure out how we align incentives and ways of working for all the players, so that people can actually, we can capture consumer attention and actually incentivize the system to create an environment where we can capture consumer attention. Just to, contextualize this a little bit more, we are in a world where, we know that 30% of the ads that are aired on TV are aired in an empty room, right? And we know that 80% of people are using a second screen when they're watching TV. We know that there are many formats on the digital side, and no impression is equal to the other one, right? When you go and do the buy, and therefore we cannot even compare them. And so, in this context, an impression becomes very meaningless, and therefore, for me, is an attentive impression is what really matters. And therefore, figuring out, okay, how can I work with the TV networks and my digital partners, and everyone, to create an attentive environment, so my impressions are paid more attention to. And I think that this is a win-win situation, because allows, all the players in this space to actually win, because a more attentive environment means that my media has a higher impact, but at the same time, it can command a higher premium, because coming from a performance marketing background, I don't care about the unit cost. I care about the ROI. So I think that, the attention economy and moving towards an attention-based measurement and cost system, or media currency system, is, I think it's the future of this industry, and what we could use this crisis to pivot and focus on.
Right. And I didn't share this with you, but I think you'll get a kick out of this. Goldfish, I mean, it's kind of sad too, but goldfish have an attention span of 9 seconds, and apparently humans now have an attention span of 8 seconds. So to your point around focusing on attention-based initiatives, right? Spot on. So have you had any, is there any examples or any kind of anything that you can share that you feel like, hey, this has been, a good test or a good direction for moving towards that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have actually started working with two TV network partners in order to optimize our buys towards viewability and attention. And viewability in the TV space is measured as someone in the room when the ad is airing, with a second by second monitoring. And as we work towards this way of buying and optimizing, we've seen a couple of very important and meaningful stats. The first thing is that obviously our viewability and attention goes up, and therefore it means that my ad is not served in an empty room, but actually has a higher chance of driving an impact. But
Right.
also, the delivery from the network side has been very positive in a world where ratings are declining and all these kind of things. And again, I think that has allowed us to find a white space for both parties to build a competitive advantage, but at the same time build something that adds value on both sides of the equation. So we're still early in the stage in the testing phase, but I think that it's an opportunity ripe for development.
Right. It's interesting. I'm going to show a little bit of my time in the space, but been here 20 plus years. But Moat, right, as you know, is a viewability company, but they were actually founded originally to measure time spent, not for viewability. And they happen to find more business. So, that's really it's really funny how it went to viewability, right?
And you mentioned Mo, but actually, it kind of based also on experience. I remember when I was at Google, we were working a lot with Mo, and and the metrics they were measuring. And so when I saw an opportunity working with another company called TVision to actually do a kind of same viewability and attention measuring on TV, it was like, well, it's something that we've been doing on the digital side for a very long time. What if we bring this concept to TV? And actually, it's been a very, very interesting space and exercise to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we've seen a lot of clients. They start to care more about cost per incremental visit. They care about engagement, right? Not only did they open or click on the ad, but what did they do? Did they interact with it? Where did they spend their time? And clients are spending more and more. Marketers are spending more and more time with those things. So
yeah,
I definitely see the same trend. Okay, you mentioned TV, you mentioned digital. What are your views? TV and radio, and you mentioned billboard. Really static is kind of like the traditional model, right?
mm-hmm.
Obviously, digital is anything from mobile, or you mentioned digital out of home. Connected TV, right? There's a lot that falls in that category as well. Like, what's your view of those? Is traditional dead? Is it all digital? Is it a mix going forward? And where do you plan to take AB and all that?
Yeah, I'm opinionated about this stuff, so I think it's a good question. But yes, no, I'm gonna be a little controversial just for the sake of this conversation. But to answer your question, I don't think TV is dead at all, but is a moment where again we have an opportunity to change things significantly. I think that advertisers, most of advertisers, and we're guilty of that to some degree as well, is that we're looking at TV all wrong. And I think that we're being, buying and transacting on TV in the wrong way. I think that, I've seen stats recently that, most advertisers buy, for example, 1849 on TV. And that means that 60% of the impressions that TV serves are given away for free, meaning that there is an older demo that is heavy consumer, but they don't get rewarded for that demo, right? So this misalignment of how you think about TV, how you buy TV, and what TV can deliver creates all sorts of distortions in terms of what a network needs to do in order to bring up back the revenue and all these kind of things, and advertisers packing more and more ads into that space. And I think that we are wrong as advertisers to ask of TV to act as a super precise medium or a precise medium when we're actually was built not to be that precise, to be a mass medium, right? So let's recognize what it can bring, what cannot bring, and therefore make sure that our buys and expectations for that medium are aligned to that. And obviously, in order to move away from what we've done for years and years and years, it requires collaboration and flexibility on both sides. But at the same time, I honestly don't think that TV is that at all. Actually, TV has a couple of secret weapons that, for whatever reasons, keep eluding the digital players, or they're not investing as much. TV, first and foremost, can have a great reach, and all the conversations that you have with the digital players, with your agencies and everything is build your reach TV first, and then you have incremental reach on digital, and that reach on digital is more and more incremental. But when can we gonna go back to a point where we can start digital first, and then eventually you go on TV, right? As performance marketer, like for example, mobile gaming companies have done in the past, they saturated everything that is uber targetable, and then because they couldn't buy anything more than there, then they went mass, right? In that sense, and more traditional in that space. And then the second thing is that TV has the TV networks, they're content producer. They can produce content and they can integrate me in the broadcast in a way that a digital player with a 15-second pre-roll, it's not going to be the same value. And so I think that in that sense there is a much different value that is passed on depending on who you work with, and we need to align to that and leverage the strength of a medium versus the other. I think that if the TV, players don't get out of the game of lower rating, high demand, and therefore price increase, and leaning on price flexibility in order to make the realize the value for them, it's gonna be a challenge for them as these big digital player with big deep pockets are coming on board and are figuring out how to play in this space. But at the same time, they can lean on their strength. They can produce great content. They can keep the attention in a way that no one else can. And therefore, I think that this is where the future is, and opportunities and areas for both players, and how they're going to play it out. For me, is fascinating and to see it come to life.
It sounds like to me, when you talk about just generally in advertising, you think that the way you buy needs to change, and you need to reward for the right audiences and be able to measure it, whether it's quote unquote traditional or digital. It's not really a one or the other, right?
100%. It's a mix of both, and I think that again, the message I always try to pass on with all the the partners that I work with is that, hey, as an advertiser, I also have my limits and things that I can do better. But if we all agree and work together to improve, right, to use this crisis in order to move to a better standard and hold hands on that, I think that we're going to get to a point where consumer and people are going to be appreciative of that, and our business are going to grow together.
Right. So you're holding a lot of your partners more accountable and wanting them to change, and so that's great. And one of the other things that we talked about is how is it becoming more relevant for consumers, right? And you're holding yourself accountable. How are some of the ways that becoming more relevant for your customers?
Yeah, there are a few things that we're doing, but if I were to break it down very simply, is two things. One is becoming part of the content, and the other one is being maniacal in the way we monitor consumer response, right? And so the first piece is becoming part of the content is very short anecdote. Someone in the previous panel was mentioning Peppa Pig, and actually, I have this story that the moment I started. My daughter is now 4, but when she was 2 and I had a cable subscription, and I started having her watch Peppa Pig on TV, the moment the ads came on, she started freaking out because she's like, why do you take away Peppa Pig from me, right? And thinking this as an example of the future generation, not knowing what an ad is, right? Or not liking ads, avoiding ads. And if daddy is making a living and putting her through college by buying and selling buying ads, right? That's going to be an issue. So, but that's simple anecdote to say that you want to make sure that your brand becomes part of the content and what people care for, right? And we've done a lot of work this year, as I was saying before. For example, when the NBA came back in the bubble, right, with the ultra court side, we have done concerts throughout this year with Bud Light Seltzer sessions and becoming part part of the content in that sense. We have organized gaming tournaments for also with Bud Light because that's where people were spending time. And actually, we're organizing now a concert for New Year's Eve with Bud Light. And actually, if anyone wants to go and RSVP, little plug here, budlight.com/NYE. It's going to be a great event for a lockdown world. But integrating our brands with what people care about, it's what's important. And then the other thing is, as I was saying, being maniacal in terms of measuring impact. The blessing and the curse that a company like ABI has is the fact that they are very, very strict about, thinking about what the North Star is, what the metrics are, and then coming back to measuring the impact you're having on those metrics. So we have developed a metric called Attention One Score, which basically shows when you put out a piece of content, being this paid or non-paid or everything, figuring out how people react to that content, and then dialing up the things that work and pulling back or iterating on the things that don't work. And therefore, the combination of these two things have been critical. The last piece, though, that we still have to figure out is how do you balance the two things, right? Because being relevant for consumers have not only a short-term impact on sales and picking up that beer, but in terms of brand equity. And oftentimes the limit that we have is that how do you balance the dollar I want to spend on driving a sale right now versus the dollars that I can bring back with that, brand equity that then will translate to in sales 6 to 12 months from now. And I think that is a big challenge that we haven't solved for, but I think that we have all the elements in place in order to act on it.
Great. Now, we've talked a lot about advertising, right, and media. And obviously AB is well known for a lot of iconic. I think back to, when it comes to advertisers and Christmas, right? It's some great ads. What's like one or two of your favorite ads that you've put out there that, whether it was either you were involved in or it could have been a predecessor of yours, or can you give a couple examples?
I think that some ads that are very, very interesting is, for example, what we've done in this past Super Bowl with Bud Light Seltzer, and we had this ad with Post Malone. And I remember that we were in a point where right before Super Bowl, we had two versions of the spot, and we didn't know exactly which one to run because we were so great, but we had one spot, right? 1/62 to run. And so we put it up on YouTube, and then we had people vote on it and actually pick the spot. And then we integrated it again as becoming part of the content. We integrated in the broadcast some lookalikes that we put in the stadiums that looked like Post Malone, and they were part of the audience. And so when after the spot, people came back to the broadcast with the spot in real life. And some of other iterations, we had also worked with memes and other things like this in order to make this really a thing when we launched. And you could argue as you said, there are so many Anheuser-Busch spots that are so remarkable and so memorable. But I really enjoyed this one here recently where we were able to again break the barrier between what is advertising versus what is content and what is entertainment, and making a large stage like the Super Bowl for me was really, really remarkable and enjoyable.
That's great. So just going back to before, you had said, when we talked about your expectations and changes, right, of how you're buying, what you're buying, how it's structured, right? And that reminds me of, there's so much talk about agency use, in-housing, right? Us at MobileFuse, we've shared, it used to be a small percent was working with brands directly like yourself. Just 3 years ago, it was 1%, right? This year it's over 40%. So it's, but we work with agencies all the time and right. So where do you think it's going? Like, do you think that's just a short blip and it's going to be all back to agencies? Do you think the model's going to change? Do you think it's all going to be in-house? Like what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I think that even in this case, we are in a moment of transformation and things are going to evolve. But, we often like the headlines of saying, okay, TV is dead, agency is dead, and all these kind of things. And it's not true. I think that there's a tremendous value that, there is tremendous value in in-housing, especially when you're bringing in a core competence that is going to be for your business. I think that, thinking about in-housing, you shouldn't be thinking about that differently than buying a house. Is that going to be a core competence that's going to stay with you for a very long time, and therefore you want to make an investment and bring it in, but then figuring out how you can leverage the agency in order to flex up either resources or solve a very big difficult problem or something that is outside your core competences in that sense. And in that regard, I think that the agency model of the future is going to have to be something that is way more modular and flexible in the way that actually allows it to enhance everything that an advertisers does. But we cannot discount the value that you can bring with someone even having an outside perspective and keeping you aware of what you could be doing better. And the last thing I think that when it comes to agencies that and the value that they can bring, one thing I'm a very big fan of is not only the big transformational ideas that take me like 6 months to enact and break out all my contracts and all these kind of things. I think that partners that can, on a daily basis, figure out how we can change things from a weekly standpoint or monthly standpoint, do things that are marginally better every time, that are actually at the end of the year are going to have it make a big difference. I think that aspect of it is undervalued because it gives you a much higher hit rate of success of things that you actually make a change on and drive an impact versus putting all your eggs in the one big transformational basket that sometimes, due to circumstances like a global pandemic, you cannot act on. So, those are my thoughts, but I get that, like anyone else.
And then, you mentioned a little bit about sports and the Super Bowl. Obviously, AB is a where do you see that relationship with the different sports leagues going forward, post COVID?
Yeah, you broke up a little bit, but I think I got the gist of the question. And as I was saying at the beginning, the way we do media and advertising and marketing at AB, Anheuser-Busch in the US especially, is very much a connection between what we do from a media standpoint, from a sponsorship standpoint, and from an experiential standpoint. To the point that actually our group is called the Connections Team, right? And with the synergy that we were able to create with both our, for example, advertising partners and our sponsorship partners has been very valuable. I think that for example, we were able to do things like during the NFL draft, the Blue the Commish kind of activation. That is something that you could not possibly do if you don't have a very strong relationship with the NFL and with the media partners in that sense. So that's something that becomes extraordinary, right? And the way you want to capitalize on those opportunities is by mixing, first of all, aligning on cultural relevance. What are the things that your audience cares about, that your brand can be credible upon, and therefore the lighthearted fun of Bud Light and the NFL is something that it came together in that sense. You want to work with your partners in order to do both custom content to that degree, but also to do integrations and be part of the broadcast, if you will. You want to think about how you're going to engage consumers and users and people that are going to watch that on the screen and then interact with a powerful hashtag or something that gets them into the game and become part of the game again, become part of the entertainment in that sense. And then at the end of the day, like I come from a performance marketing background, so you cannot deny me of, okay, but how are we driving the business forward? How are we driving sales and all these kind of things? And how do we make that part of a commercial integration, part of the whole campaign, not just add on at the end of the planning cycle. But I think that is some of the pillars of how we have a thought differently about things. But again, COVID has become for us a way to actually apply pressure on a way of working and figure out better and improved ways of creating synergies and making something come to life. So I'm expecting better, more integrated relationship between partnership, between media, experiential, and everything. But at the same time, thinking through how can we activate in a way that we can really make an impact rather than just spreading ourselves too thin. And so in that sense, fewer is better from, in many, many degrees.
Totally agree with that. So we're moving on to our Q&A session here, Paolo. And, I have to say there's might be a record number of questions. So we'll try to get through as much as we can. But what I'll do, like, if there's a question here, obviously that you don't want to answer, just say, hey, could we go to the next question? So,
for sure.
All right. So, first question is, you've talked about delivering purpose-based marketing to a certain extent. We're trying to shift towards that with some of your advertising. Type of measurement for like sentimental lift, right? Brand equity lift in a way, but even specifically to sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, this is the tricky part right now in this day and age, is that we have a lot of established way of measuring sentiment and as you said, right, from a brand equity lift and things like this, but also getting a pulse of how we actually that real time kind of analysis of how people are going to be reacting is interesting, is a huge opportunity, something that needs to be figured out. We have our own internal creative agency called Draftline, and we've and with them, we're trying to figure out how we can take that real-time signals in order to understand exactly what's working and what's not working. But again, the thing that we're trying to figure out is then, okay, what's working now? What is the impact that it's going to take, in the immediate sales or in the immediate impact short term versus long term, and how we balance the two? Because when you have to make an investment in terms of saying, okay, let's push more of this, push less of that, then let's figure out, what is the implication of that decision, and that has something to be figured out. But I think that the one thing that we got very well is figuring out when something has traction, understanding that early, and that's also to the internal creative capabilities that we have in-house, for sure.
Okay. So this is so we've talked a lot about creativity, and this comes from actually a fellow marketer that leads up a pretty large team as well. How do you continue your creativity with everyone working remotely?
That is a very good question, and it's a challenge. But I think that thankfully we thought that remote working in many instances was going to be the end of everything that we do. And then unfortunately, we had to prove ourselves that we can do a lot of things that we didn't think were possible. But also there is a combination of elements here that, let's also take the bright side of this situation. I'm in meetings back to back all day, but if I have a 30 minutes, break, I go and play with my daughter again, or, do something that distracts me for a second outside of a work environment. That actually allows us to bring back creativity or a different way of thinking on a problem that if you're just in an office environment, it doesn't allow your head to go into that direction. And so I think that there are, if we're able to, strike the right balance for our teams and our people between, the work environment and the personal life in the situation and the context that we're living in, I think that there are opportunities to be tapped in order to foster creativity, foster productivity, solve problem solving, and all these kind of things. But that only happens if we're all, aware and conscious that, what was before cannot be in a situation where we're all locked at home.
Right. My team could tell you years ago, I said, we're not going to do work-life balance anymore. We're going to do work-life integration, right? So that they both work well together. And you don't shut one off to go to the other and vice versa. Here's another great question. Okay. So you talked about testing a lot of new things or potentially testing out new partnerships and there's new avenues. Like how, you have such great traditions and how do you test new channels? How do you approach those?
We try to be very methodical with ourselves and our agency partners, and then with our media partners in understanding what success looks like for us, and then understanding what is the brief that we give to our agency and our media partners, and understand how they can respond to that brief. So we take a lot of effort in doing the early planning, and again, this is another really good thing of the structure that AB brings to the table in terms of saying we do very methodical work in terms of 10-year planning, 3-year planning, 1-year planning. And it's very structured, and it forces you to think about the future of what you're where you're at and where the future has to be. And then based on that, you can also align your teams in thinking, okay, where are we? What can we improve? Where do we want to move? And that is in circumstance that at that point, it becomes very, very clear then to your agency and your media partners what you need and what you need to help solve for. And actually, we have enacted in the past couple of years a process with our agency where you are the new partners day. We have the existing partners day and the new partners day. And the existing partners, we with the concept of fewer and better, we bring all together, right? From digital, traditional, and everyone, right? All in one room when we could, right? We're gonna have to be creative now this year, and figuring out, okay, this is where AB is going. This is the challenge for my TV friends, my digital friends, my social friends, my programmatic friends, and and figuring out, okay, guys, this is the challenge I have to solve. This is what I loved, and this is where we fell short. So bring me more of that and less of that, right? And then the same way is, we try to be very methodical with the new partners and figuring out these are the challenges in an abbreviated version of the brief that our agency delivers to these new partners, figuring out what are the challenges, give a couple of brand examples and say, hey, how would you go about solving this problem? And I think that has been incredibly useful to show the potential new partners that really put the homework to create a custom solution for you versus just basically lifting, a PowerPoint from one pitch to the other pitch and just, bringing forward whatever they had. And allowed us to really find new great partners that, we've grown our relationships in. So, that structure allowed us to then move in a better direction.
Smart, really smart. Okay, the next question here is going back to the whole in-housing versus, agency relationship. They were curious, how do you leverage the agency today and what do you have in-house? What capabilities do you how do you divide that up today?
Yeah, we have our team is structured. The team that sits under me is structured in 3 parts. We have what we call a media team that focuses on overall media coordination, the whole media budget and everything, and they're assigned brand by brand. Then we have a digital media team that takes care more specifically about social and programmatic. But then they are not traders per se, so they're not an in-house agency, if you will, but more of a strategic consultant and coordination that goes deeper than the media team on the high tech knowledge requirement that these social channels and the tech channels require. And then we have the data team that, kind of fuels everything that we do and enhances everything that we do. We work with a social agency, we work with our media agency, and then we work with the different DSPs. And so we have, I would say, a hybrid model. And that's, I think that, it's working very well for us. So again, if you could think about the concept of in-housing, for me, is more of a co-location whenever you could, than an in-housing per se in that sense.
Makes sense. Well, I see Isabel, and I haven't even been watching the time. And I love seeing you, Isabel, but I'm a little disappointed that the time with Paolo is up. So, Paolo, it's been great. I mean, you were fantastic, and you gave a lot of great insights. So I appreciate.